Hi guys, Tugger here with a new video, and this video is the long-awaited solo shuffle tier list video for season 1. And this is not a prediction, this is a pure meta tier list video for solo shuffle. So I've gathered all the information possible. I played multiple classes, multiple specs, but also played multiple specs versus me, and some specs weren't just there because it's just not as represented. But I have gathered the information from online, of course, from people that were fighting those specs or playing those specs, and I will give you my honest opinion about those specs. So you will see, I will compare it with my prediction video, so if I was right or wrong, we will also know that. But it's a very fun thing to do, to compare it before the season and to the actual season, if I was right with the predictions or not. But in the timestamps, you will find all the classes. So if there is Death Knight, you will see the Death Knight section where I'm talking about Unholy and Frost and give my opinion about it. I will give my opinion about every single spec and tell you why I've put a spec into a specific tier. And I'm not going to say, look, Unholy DK S tier, Frost DK A tier. I'm not going to do that. I want to actually make you understand where I'm coming from whenever I'm putting someone or something into a specific tier. And again, it's an opinion, it's subjective. I think no one will be super happy 100% about the tier list, but I will try to actually make you understand why I've put a spec into a tier. So thank you for already clicking on the video, and let's start right away. We will put tanks into the separate section because I'm not going to talk about tanks. I've seen some tanks in social, some successful, some not, but I'm not going to promote any tanks for now until they have fixed how it feels to play against and with. So let's talk about Frost DK first, to the Death Knight class. For me, it is a A tier spec. I've put S, A+, A, B, C, D, and A means it's meta, A+, it means it's very close to God mode. S tier is a God mode spec, and B tier is good, I would say average, but it is a good spec. C tier means it is underpowered, and D tier it means that it is doo-doo. Not a lot of specs will be in D tier, at least in solo shuffle. So, and Frost DK, why are they in A tier? Because they are actually very bursty, have some like good sustain defense versus magic users, because they still have spell warding, they still have AMS, AMZ, they have a lot of CC with blind, stun, like AoE stun from the PvP talent. You also have the strangulation, which is silence. You can also have asphyxiate, which is a single target stun. You have blind. Again, you have multiple things going on, and you can also kite very well. So if you're playing versus a Fury Warrior or an Arms Warrior or any kiteable melee, you can just Chain of Ice and basically run away. So that's your defense. You need to understand that you're not going to be all in all the time. Sometimes you have to lay back, try to give the healer a bit of rest, and then go back in whenever you are full HP, for example. But Frost DKs are very strong. They are underestimated, underplayed too, because Unholy is just a bit better, and that's why I'm putting Unholy as A+. People were saying, oh my god, my Death Knight class was nerfed to the ground, I'm not going to be able to play Death Knight, I'm going to reroll right away. And then you see just Unholy DK still have huge success on the ladder. It's one of those specs that have like huge rating with also the representation behind it. We don't have the actual numbers, but whenever I have the numbers on Kunamate, hopefully they will do that. I will discuss about those numbers, but Death Knights are still well represented for the Death Knight spec class. It's basically a class that is not really played a lot of, like, most of the time, but now it is actually as strong as, like, I would say beginning of the preseason. Even after the nerfs with Death Strike or whatever, you're still a powerhouse just with your damage. And solo shuffle, self-sustain is very interesting, but damage is king. If you can burst someone down, if you can have high consistent damage, the dampening will do their job. And Death Strike, in general, with the dampening, like in solo shuffle, doesn't really matter. If you're talking about freeze, I get that Death Strike is a very big defensive, but in Soul Shuffle, your dampening is online very soon. So it's already 30% at the beginning of the match. So you already see that self-sustain is not going to make you win a game or not. It is basically like the tankiness of a class. Basically, do they have shields like AMS, spell warding, or whatever, or do they have great damaging tools like, for example, unholy TKs? They are just absurd. They are good versus magic users. They're not that bad versus physical users. But to be honest, you have tools to deal with that. And you have insane burst. Again, I'm going to repeat that. Your burst is insane, and that's why it deserves the A plus spot. Now let's talk about another class that thought they were dead, but they are really not. And it is Demon Hunters. I like Havoc Demon Hunter at least. Vengeance, I'm going to put it in tanks. It is still impressive, man, how much damage it can dish. It has a lot of CC. It has actually a lot of carry potential, and still is one of those specs you don't like to face. If you're melee, Blur is absurd. If you're a caster, they have literally, I'm close, but it's 20% magic damage reduction, like more or less. It could be 15, it could be 10, but it is like pure passive. You don't need to do anything. Darkness is such a great ability if you know when to use. You can really own a whole burst rotation from the enemy team just by doing darkness at the right time, which is often full HP, and you will be safe for that. Of course, your teammate has to stay in it. That's another problem, but by itself, it has so much carry potential. By itself, Demon Hunters can win alone. They can, of course, they will need a healer, but they can win alone just because of their damage. Often I saw their second DPS do no damage, and still they can win with the absurd damage that a Demon Hunter can actually dish. And whenever I'm saying Demon Hunter, I'm saying Havoc, but whatever. I'm saying Demon Hunter, right? Balanced Druid. Balanced Druid is for me not as bad as people would say. I think the damage is not super high. It has a lot of actual like pad damage on the meters. It can really be annoying, and it can add up over time. It can also burst at one point whenever they're doing Eclipse, like the Celestial Alignment go. But what makes Balanced Root actually very strong is Root Beam and Cyclones, and the ability to actually be annoying. And I think Balanced Root is very good at that, and that's why for me it's a good spec. B tier is good spec. It means that it's average for the whole tier list, but as a whole, you can climb as a Balanced Druid, so it's a B tier spec. Feral Druids, S tier, easily one of those specs that didn't get touched since the beginning. It does insane amount of pressure, insane amount of bleed damage, insane amount of everything, really. And that is what makes Feral Druids very good. They have Cyclone, but they don't really cast it a lot because it's very risky. But they can stun a lot, they can bleed multiple targets, and basically go for AoE build where they are going to bleed the enemy team dry. They have some counters like, let's say, Holy Paladin or like Dark Iron Dwarves, where they can just dispel all bleed damage, for example. But a good Feral Druid, they are really annoying to play against. You have some Feral Druids trying a Convoke build in Solo Shuffle. It doesn't really work, or at least it works, but it's cheesy. But if you want to have success with Feral Druids, just play the bleed build, bleed them out, try to stun at the right time, try to cyclone at the right time, try to peel at the right time, and you're going to be golden. Don't forget, Entangling Roots is so strong. Healers are not dispelling roots because they are afraid of getting then a important dispel not being able to dispel, you know, like for example they dispel roots, but then they get polymorphed or whatever, or at least their allies get polymorphed. They will not have their dispel ready, and they don't want to have that situation. Or you're playing with a shadow priest versus you, or you're playing versus a shadow priest and they're afraid of the horror effect. Or for example, they're playing versus an affliction warlock and they don't want to actually dispel because they don't want to die, right? So the root effect is by itself not that strong, but it makes it very hard to dispel in solo shuffle, and that's why you have to spam it a bit, because it's very strong versus a few specs, like for example demon hunters, for example even warriors, and in a whole, like arms warrior, if you root me, I'm just dead. Like I'm just dead inside, not dead like physically like in the game, but I would say inside of me I'm like dying, because I feel like I'm not bursting because of it. So that's why I'm putting Feral Druids as S tier. I don't know if I'm going to put ahead of Havoc or not, but that's probably for the rearrangement of the tier list whenever I'm done with it. Resto Druid, it is for me, because I'm going to do spoilers, right? Preservation Evoker is probably S tier, 100%. But is a Restoration Druid on par with Preservation Evoker? And for me, it really is. They have CC, they have the possibility to just run away, they have possibility to not engage the enemy team. They can just heal and stay away and then go in whenever they are overextending. And that's maybe your job as a Restore Druid, not to rake stun someone in melee and then get silenced, killed, stunned, whatever. But your job is to be basically the healer bot that you are actually in trees, but not now, a bit less. But in Soul Shuffle, you should be a healer bot and try to cyclone whenever you can, but not too much, because you can just get interrupted and then it's over, right? That's why for me it is a S tier spec. They are very good at non-engaging gameplay, and they can also engage, of course, but it's very risky in Soul Shuffle, and that's why I recommend always Druids just stick with healing, and whenever a priest comes up to try to fear you, you just try to CC them very quickly with a Cyclone. You just need to react on the healer, because the healer will try to make play, and you will have to counter that play with your own spells, and that's why as a whole, Resto Druids are very hard to kill if they are smart. If they're not really smart and they are melee with the other melees, like okay, it's a very easy switch. You just switch on the Resto Druid and he will die. But if they are smart, they're staying very far away. They have the mobility to catch up. They have the mobility to run away. And that's why, for me, as a whole, it's a S tier spec. Devastation is a C tier spec. It has a damage, but it's easily killed, to be honest. I don't have difficulties killing a Devastation. It's very hard to know what they need, but they don't have spells. They don't have a lot of spells, so it's very hard to balance something outside of damage. So either they're like busted, or either they're just not playable. That's the spectrum where they are. They can keep on buffing, and then it will be broken because they can one shot, or they are not getting buffed on damage and they try to look for something else, and it will be just like, okay, it exists, but it's not going to do anything. And that's like, some games have that problem, like League of Legends, where they are in a number balancing, I would say, chaos, where it's only numbers that is going to make that class strong. It is not the kit, it is not the design, it is purely numbers. And what they need is actually just rework from the ground up. I think Devastation is just not a great spec. I think it's people will probably hate me for that, but I think Devastation is a L for Blizzard. It's really one of the worst spec made. And Preservation Evoker, but like on the other hand, it looks like they got all the love of the developer team. Like, it's so fantastic to play. It's so fantastic to be helped by a Preservation Evoker. It's so fantastic how many tools they have, how many buttons they can press to actually save people, that it doesn't look like two specs from the same class. It looks like two different spectrum, where Devastation is not a ready spec and Preservation Evoker is a ready spec. So now let's talk about Preservation Evoker. Why is it S tier in Solo Shuffle? Well, to be honest, in Solo Shuffle, it is very hard to kill a Preservation Evoker, because it is just the way how Solo Shuffle works. It needs to have communication to actually switch on the right time to kill the Preservation. Well, in Solo Shuffle, you don't have like communication where you can say, look, we're gonna switch right now, because they used all the CDs. So that's not gonna happen. But in 3v3, I feel like Preservation Evoker is not as OP. It is very strong. It is probably too strong because of the mana regen. I think if the mana was a bit less, like for example Holy Paladin, we wouldn't see Preservation Evoker as strong as it is right now. But in Solo Shuffle, you don't have that problem. The problem is it can die, but it needs communication for it. And just because of that fact, it is already a A-tier spec. But then you all will also add the throughput, you will add the CDs, you will add the CC, you will add Quell. Again, it's so strong, some people just forget they have an interrupt, but as a preservation evoker, you can just interrupt a caster. So a caster just doesn't exist versus you if you are playing smart. You have sick mobility. You have, again, the CC immunity in the beginning of the match, which, to be honest, in Soul Shuffle is very hard to counter. While in 3v3, you know, you're going to say to your team, look, he pressed that button. We just need to run away from him for a few seconds and we are good to go. But in Soul Shuffle, your Fury Warrior, your teammate of the day is going to leap onto the preservation evoker, not see that buff, and try to fear Stormbolt, and that's it. He has no CC anymore, and he's going to die just because of it. And that's what's happening in Soul Shuffle, right? I think a lot of people, like you guys, noticed it, that people don't know how to play against the preservation evoker. I find it super annoying to play against, but I know that in 3v3 with my mates, if I'm in vocal, and I see them actually press that, if I play with a dispeller, I would say, look, you have to dispel it really quickly, or look, we have to run away and try to win time. That's basically the play versus that. And that's why sometimes you don't see Preservation Evoker even play that in trees, because everyone knows now how it works. But in Soul Shuffle, it's weird how people just... It looks like they're losing knowledge whenever they are going in Soul Shuffle. Anyways, a bit of a rant, of course. BM Hunter. BM Hunter is, to be honest, I'm going to be harsh. I think in Soul Shuffle it's C tier. Soul Shuffle is basically a bracket made of bursts. So if you're bursting very well, you're going to be a lot higher. If you have utility, you have CC and defensives, you're going to be a lot higher. But defensives, BM Hunter doesn't really have that. Roar of Sacrifice is quite good, but I mean, people just ignore it, or they just switch, and then they switch back. You don't have Craven Stratagem anymore, so there is that. Turtle is cool, but I mean, you can play around it. It's like a bubble of a paladin. That's not really a defensive, right? It's alright. It's a stasis effect. Like you cannot really kill him, but he can't do damage. So your self healing is alright, but again, dampening. So accelerating is not going to do a lot of like healing for you. Your kiting is quite good, but again, if you kite and your healer doesn't know how you kiting, they'll have to chase you, and then they will they will end up in a CC chain, and then you are there probably dying from a Fury Warrior, probably dying from a Demon Hunter, and that's why for me it's a C tier spec. While in contrary, for example, Survival Hunter has a lot of burst, which is reliable burst. It's not like they need to cast like an MM. They can do very well, but I'm not going to say it's A+. I think it's more of an A tier spec. It is meta. People need to catch on the Survival Hunter. I think once they know that Survival Hunter is quite good, they will play it a bit more. The problem is, again, Ice Traps, people sometimes break it with AoE, and you have a solution. You can play the Diamond Eyes PvP talent, so basically you can just safely trap and they will not get like damaged or broken. It will be a shorter duration though, but I think Survival Hunter as a whole is quite good. I think it lacks defensives, and that's why it's not A+ or S tier. But imagine if you had Craven Stratagem, I think it would like be A+ easily. Because it could like not die basically, but right now it can die, so that's why it's an A tier. It's really on the verge of B tier, like good, but I think it's a meta spec because it has some great kill shot potential where they're going to wreck you with their coordinated assault, so they can actually do kill shot at any time. And they have some great bomb damage and some great mongoose bites. I got credit for a lot like yesterday, and I think it's really good. I might be wrong, it could be just a B tier good spec, but I think it's a meta spec just because of the burst rotation that they can actually put out, which is not really the hardest burst rotation out there. MM Hunter, I think it's a good spec. Pretty underrated. People are just sleeping on it. Of course, the changes are not up yet about double tap, so it could change again depending on the situation where they are going to actually not replace it with something good. But for now, since it's the beginning of season 1, in mid-season we can have maybe another tier list about that. But for now, B tier, has crazy damage, has easily one of the best CC in the game, like BM and like Survival Hunter. And it is a lot easier than previously in Shadowlands. Now you have really a lot of stuns. You can really easily trap someone. In Solo Shuffle, a trap can just make you win. And a double tap combo can probably kill someone in the opener if they are not pressing their buttons. So that's why for me it's a bit better than BM, but it's worse than Survival. Because it has to cast and has to kite. So it means that people are going to probably get lost, and sometimes you can lose games because of it. Arcane Mage, A+. I don't know. I don't know what to say, man. It is very, very meta. It's over the top meta. It really, if it gets one buff, it could be easily S tier. The only reason that I would not put it in S tier right now is because it has to cast. It has a lot of great CC, but they are breakable. They are really annoying to kill though. They have like crazy damage, crazy execute. People don't know how to play against. Sometimes they forget about to like pressing buttons. They know how fire mages work, but on arcane mage, they think like touch of magi is nothing. They think arcane surge is just another spell, and they just stand there and face tank damage. But I think arcane mage is really, really strong. Easily the best mage spec in Soul Shuffle. Fire mage, I think it's not as bad as people would say, but the ladder does give them right, and for me it's then a C tier spec. Be careful, it got buffed, and it could be with the damage that you are getting that it's going to be a B tier spec. But I'm going to put it in C tier because it needs coordination to actually have a great combust go. And I think in trees it could be easily A tier, but I need to actually gather more information to make a trees comp. I'm going trees tier list. I will probably separate ranged and melee because it's just different. But in solo shuffle, everything is shuffled, right? So for me, it's going to be a C tier spec based on those information. Mages, frost mages, they are good specs. B is good, remember. Yeah, I'm going to write it too because people are going to forget it. It means good. B means good. It's not like it's average for the tier list because it's in the middle, but it is still good because it's actually insane at bursting, insane at surviving, insane at actually just spamming ice lances. And whenever you have the great comp, a great comp, and you're facing a good comp, you normally should win. That's easily a higher spec, like higher tier spec. But I put it in B tier because you could end up in a melee like solo shuffle with demon hunters, DKs, and fury warriors, for example, and then you get like no uptime on your cast. You will be just there, try to slow people and try to polymorph the healer. So that's why for me it's B tier and not A tier. The damage is easily very high, but it's very hard to go in melee soul shuffles, for example. In caster soul shuffles, you're pretty good. If you have a mixed soul shuffle match where you have a caster, you'll have two melees, you could also make it work. You're also very good versus holy paladins, for example, because Bob doesn't do anything. And that's why for me it just is a B tier spec. Mistweaver Monk, they are S tier, and just because of that fact, I'm gonna drop Restoration Druid into A+. I think Mistweaver Monks are the most underrated healer out there. They are insane. They have CC, they have healing, they have fist weaving if they really want to do, but it's very, very sketchy in Soul Shuffle, I must say. But it's actually insane how they can rotate CCs, rotate CDs. They can also just run away very quickly. They can do some sick plays. They are annoying to kick because if you're playing versus melees, you have to walk up onto the Mistweaver to actually silence. If you're playing with versus casters and a Mistweaver, it's very hard to interrupt the Mistweaver whenever a Affliction is actually free casting or Elemental Shaman is actually free casting. So they are very, very strong. Especially in solo shuffle. Mana is not a problem. They get buffed all the time too. So for me, they are very close at overtaking Preservation Evoker. It just needs a few buffs and a few nerfs from a Preservation Evoker to be actually the best healer out there. It's a very strong spec. Let's talk about Windwalker. I think it's the most underrated spec out there. I think people are not taking Windwalker into account, but Windwalkers, they are easily for me A+. I was wrong on my prediction. I think I predicted it a bit lower, but they are insane. The one-shots that they can produce, the CC that they can produce, the actual mobility to run away and then TP, and then they can TP back into the fray. They have a lot of great things. They also have multiple walls. They have Touch of Karma. Although it's quite bad, it does something to people because people are just switching away from you. So it does help. Ring of Peace is such a great ability as well because you can push people away. You can also just make them stuck on a wall. They can also cast something in your Ring of Peace to basically stop the cast. So you have a lot of ways to actually be annoying. And I think Windwalker are very good. I think it's even better than Unholy DK. So that's my take. Holy Paladin. I think Holy Paladin is one of the best healers because they have a lot of tools, like for example Blessing of Sacrifice, which you can make it a 1-minute CD, and it is still ultimate sacrifice, by the way. You have 2 bobs, you have 2 freedoms, you have Divine Shield, you have a wall, you have the possibility to heal absurd amounts of healing, but whenever you are focused, that's the problem. And whenever you end up in caster cleaves or end up in caster soul shuffles, it's very annoying because your 2 bobs do nothing. They do really nothing versus them. Mages can even steal them, so it's not really as useful as other healers. And that's why for me it's an 8-tier spec. It's a meta spec. It is definitely one of the best healer. They don't have the difficulties of a disc priest of a resto shaman, for example. They have tools to really be strong. And again, I think soul shuffle is really a melee bracket. You see a lot of melees. If you are a caster, you should probably feel what I feel whenever I'm going on my destruction warlock. I face 3 melees with a demon hunter, a windwalker, and a fury warrior. You just do not get to cast. And the healers now have interrupts. A holy paladin can just walk up casually and just do rebuke. Mistweaver can do spear hand. Resto shamans are super annoying. Elemental shamans are super annoying because of grounding totem, wind shear. You can't do anything, and that's why for me it deserves the A spot, like Holy Paladin, because it's not as good versus casters. Let's talk about Retribution Paladin. I think I've underrated Retries. I think it's not A+, it is not S tier, but it is definitely A tier. It has insane amount of damage. It has actually one shot, one tap potential most of the time. You can really kill at any time if you get the procs and the right procs at the right time. Lawbringer does insane AoE pressure. You might think 30k is nothing, but 30k every time you're doing judgment, it will add up. And especially some healers are not as good in AoE healing as others. They will feel it. Also, they will never know whenever you're going to switch because you don't need a lot of prerequisite, I would say, to actually switch. It's not like a Colossus Smash you're doing with your warrior and the Resto Druid is like 20 yards away and you're switching. Well, Colossus Smash is already used, so your burst rotation is a bit scuffed. So a Retribution Paladin doesn't have that problem. It's basically judgment and do a holy power spender and you will do already great damage. And then you have final reckoning, you have of course divine toll if you're playing with that, and your self-healing is not as bad. It is not very good, so that's why it can be A+ or S tier. But I think just because of the damage that can produce, the CC and the self-protection with Divine Shield pops, and also now you can lay on hands on people, I think Retribution Paladin are quite good. And that's why for me it's an 8-tier spec. Disc Priest, C tier. I was wrong. I thought it was one of the best specs out there, but I am super wrong. I just think there is a world of difference between the A and the C tier for Disc Priest. They cannot be good. For me, it's just a bad spec. because it cannot do whatever they are actually meant to do. It's atonement healing, and in Soul Shuffle, it's very fast paced. 30% dampening, so atonement healing will already heal for nothing, and you will actually end up so that's actually very big. In Soul Shuffle, getting is pretty rare, but for Disc Priest is actually not really rare. It can happen, and it happens more often than not. But you do get a lot of buffs on the PTR, so you will probably go into A tier or A plus territory after those buffs. Double pain suppression is quite big, but right now you don't have the throughput to actually be higher. I think it's really between devastation and BM. I would say it's even ahead of BM, but it's probably on par with Fire Mage. Holy Priest. Ah, by the way, it's not because your spec is C tier that you cannot climb with it. It's basically harder to climb with it. It's not like do not play those specs. It's more like, look, you're going to have a tough time, and that's the truth. So, Holy Priest. Holy Priests are for me between A plus and A. It's very hard to actually judge. I think it's better than Holy Paladin, so I'm going to put at the top of A's tier. They are very close to A plus, but I think it is still in a nerfed version of Shadowlands. You would think they are better because of the talents, but they are not. They did lose Kyrian Covenant, which was pretty big, and in Soul Shuffle you could really carry games because of it, but right now you cannot. So for me, it is. I was meaning preseason, by the way, preseason Soul Shuffle. So for me, it's an 8 year spec. It's still meta. You're going to be happier to have a Holy Paladin and a Disc Priest in your team, and in general, they have a lot of tools to actually cheat death. They can just Spirit Redemption themselves, so they can actually free heal without getting interrupted or anything, and they can actually pair it with Ray of Hope, so basically they will be safe from dying because of that combo. So I think just because of that, you can really ruin some people's day, and it's very strong in social to actually have those kinds of combos. Shadow Priest, they were S tier, but they got nerfed in previous, like in this patch. So this Wednesday, you will see a new like Tuesday also for our friends the Americans. They got nerfed, but also buffed. Buffed in consistent damage, nerfed on the actual self-healing, the self-peel, the actual damage of Void Volley, for example, and Shadowward Death. So for me, that's why it is going to be a A+ spec. It is still very strong. Probably one of the best casters, but it will lack the Void Volley. I think it could even be A tier. It's very hard. I think it's like not top of A plus. It will be like really bottom of the A plus. It's a caster, so it will need to cast. It is easily controllable, easily focused, and they did nerf the things that are actually made it very hard to kill a Shadow Priest. Now, Powered Shield is nerfed, Vampiric Embrace is nerfed, the nerfs from previous patch is also live. So for me, just because of that, it is a A+ spec. Now, Assassination Rogues. I'm going to make people mad, but for me it's an S tier spec, man. People are playing the wrong spec in Soul Shuffle. In my games, I see them play with the 4 poisons, which is a good dampening spec, to be honest. But you want to play King's Bane if you're an Assassination Rogue. You want to one-shot people. You want to actually be able to kill someone in a smoke bomb. You don't want to dampen the game. You want to actually be able to finish games by yourself, and Kingsbane can do that for you. And people like, I think higher levels are playing probably with Kingsbane, but in my games, they're not really do that. They are not really doing that. So for me, it's very hard to actually put them lower because I know that Assassination is very strong. I know that it's actually a one tapper. It is insane the amount of damage that it can do, and it got even more nerfed right now with Deathmark actually not replicating 100% of the bleeds, but it will be 70% of the damage of the bleeds. So it could be A plus since the nerf, but for me it's still S minus, something like that, where you are going to be actually very successful with Assassination Rogue, and it doesn't really need a lot of coordination to make it work. Outlaw Rogue, I think in Soul Shuffle they are just good. They're just good. Um, I didn't really see a lot of Outlaws, to be honest. And whenever I saw one, they weren't really impressive. They did some damage, but it's not bursty. They have CC, but it's very hard to actually mesh CC with a solutionful group because people break blinds, people actually stun DR people, so your kidney shot will not be like a full kidney shot, it will be like a half kidney shot. And because of all those informations, I think it is a average to B tier spec. People might put it higher, but for me, I don't see people play a lot of Outlaw. Outlaw is just not as good as people may think, and they maybe remember about Shadowlands or in threes or in twos, but in Soul Shuffle, it is not a great spec because it doesn't have the burstiness of, let's say, an Assassination Rogue or Subtlety. Now, if we talk about Subtlety, Subtlety is for me A+. I'm going to explain why. It is still very strong, and for me, the best Subtlety Rogue will make it feel like a S tier spec, probably better than Havoc even. But it needs perfect execution of certain abilities. It needs to actually have things aligning for the rogue to actually make it possible to kill someone. Shadowy Duel is incredibly strong. Because of that, it just deserves the A spot, because Shadowy Duel, people react super badly on it. They just die instantly because they don't pop CDs, or their trinket is down and they are going to get kidney shots Shadowy Duel. So just because of that, I think it's an A plus spec. It's not as easy as Assassination Rogue. They do need a bit of coordination to make it work. You can play around it and you can still cheese people, but I think in higher elo at least, I don't find it really strong. I think it's very strong because it's A plus, but not as strong as Assassination Rogue, where I know that I'm going to die if I'm not reacting on Deathmark. That's pretty much it. Elemental Shaman. Well, I was wrong. I think it's an 8 year spec. It is very meta. They have builds where basically they're not casting. They are squishy. They do die. They do die in stuns actually. But versus melees, you're going to have a tough time. But versus casters, you're going to feel like a god. You have grounding totem. You can even play double grounding totem. You have instance, you have a lot of spread damage. If you're playing mastery and still with the amount of talents that can make you actually help yourself to do those kinds of damage, I think just because of that, it is a meta spec. It has Hex, which is very hard for healers to deal with because people just don't decurse. Like Feral Druids can decurse, but they don't even do that. Mages can do that, but they don't do that as well, or they take another talent. I think it's not baseline, so they do not take it for some reason. I think as a whole, Elemental Shaman is very strong, but if you end up in a melee Soul Shuffle, you will probably hate your life because they are just going to focus you all the time. And most of the time, you will get focused because you are one of the easiest trainable targets in the game. Enhancement Shaman, they did nerf the one-shots. Double one-shots actually. Ele Blast got nerfed and the Lightning Bolt from Primordial Wave. But for me, just because of that, I will put them a bit lower than Retribution Paladin. I think Retribution Paladin is the better hybrid. And in general, I think Enhancement Shaman, they are very squishy. The one saving grace that they had, they got nerfs from it. They could one-shot people, but now with those nerfs, it is literally halved. It's minus 50% on the Lightning Bolt from your Primordial Wave. So the one-shots like 300k Lightning Bolts, you will not see that anymore. So because of that, your cheesiness is gone. I think it's just an average good spec, but in 3s and 2s, it will have a bit more luck, a bit more fun tied to it. So please check out the tier lists I'm going to put out for 2v2 and 3v3 and try to separate melees and ranged into different tier lists. Restoration Shaman. Well, Restoration Shaman is very controversial, I would say. Versus casters, you are one of the best, and versus melees that are going to focus you, you are D tier. So it's very hard to give it a good place. My heart would say B tier because I play caster, but I know that most of the time you're playing versus melee, so just because of that, I'm going to put it on par with Disc Priest. The throughput from those two specs are just very low. It's not like enjoyable to do. I think it needs buffs, but it's very hard to buff it because I feel like Blizzard doesn't know what they want to do with Restoration Shaman. Do they want to buff totems to heal very good amounts, or do they want to actually buff Riptide to actually do a lot of instant healing, but it can be busted if it's too buffed? Or they want to do casted abilities, but the problem is it is getting interrupted all the time, and it doesn't even heal the amounts that it has to heal to be worth it to cast. So for me, that's why it's a C tier, and I'm hopeful. I hope to put it soon B tier or A tier, but for now, I think in Soul Shuffle it just deserves the C tier spot. It could go into D tier, but it's very hard to actually judge. It's very hard because sometimes if you're playing versus casters, you're not a D tier. You're probably one of the best healers out there, but if you're playing versus melees, then it feels like you're garbage. So it's very hard to give a proper rating there. Affliction Warlock, very hard to judge. I think it's A plus behind Shadow Priest. It has damage. It has the annoyance of actually not being able to kill, but they got nerfed multiple times. Their stamina is now down. They will have Soulburn nerfed, and they will probably even more nerf it. I don't know, man. I feel like it's not as good as in preseason. They nerfed it multiple times. They did buff the damage on Malefic Rupture, so that's something good. But I think the damage is not what is missing for Affliction. I think Demon Armor is still one of the best PvP taunts that you had, and you removed it. And now versus melees, you're just not tanky. So what do they need to do? They need to actually buff the tankiness of, like, the passive tankiness of a Warlock. But whenever that happens, it becomes too obnoxious because they do nothing to actually deserve that. So for me, it deserves a A+. The damage is still very high. They can kill into, like, dampening games. It's not often that you're going to win in the opener though. I'm very close to put it in A tier, to be honest, but I'm going to put in A+, and we will see what is going to happen in the coming weeks. Technology Warlock got nerfed, but I think it's the best caster in the game because they didn't really touch the obvious damage that it can produce. It does insane amount of damage. Fellstorm just does minimum 100k in single target, and if they are AoEing, it's very hard to actually heal through it. You also have the Pit Lord, you have the Big Daddy summon, I would say, like Maldiva would say. So I don't know. I feel like it's hard to nerf it. It's also hard to buff it. I think Demonology as a spec is one of those specs that either is S tier or D tier. There is no in between. It's either it's so strong that it's becoming S tier, or it is so bad that nobody is going to play it because it's so bad and it's going into D tier. So very hard to balance. I don't know how they are going to be able to do that. Destruction Warlock, I'll play it. I'm going to be honest, it is a... I want to put it in D tier, man. But they're going to get buffed, so I'm hopeful. So I'm going to put it in underpowered, so C tier. They are good. They do a lot of damage, but they get cock blocked all the time. Like, they get so many mini CCs, they get focused all the time, and they are tanky with my build. If you want to check that out, you can always check that out. But people just kite all the time. Whenever you have a burst, they go pillar hump, and then you have no options to actually do anything. So for me, it's a C tier spec. It could be better. It could also be worse. I think with the buffs from this patch and maybe from the next patch, it will go up into B tier or A tier. But the problem is in Soul Shuffle, it is still too melee oriented, and it becomes very hard to actually deal anything or any damage if you're trained by two melees, let's say a Demon Hunter and let's say even a Feral Druid or a Fury Warrior. Arms Warrior for me is my main, and I'm having to be honest, it is a good spec, but it is not a great spec. It's strong, but I think in Soul Shuffle, it just depends too much on the healers. And for me, it's very, very hard to actually put it higher because I want to. Versus melees, you feel good, but versus casters, you do feel so bad, and every root that they are going to apply on you is actually deadly for your health. It is something that makes you die inside of you. Like not getting a dispel because of a root is really annoying. The damage is there, the consistent damage is there, the CC is there, the peel towards the allies are also there with intervene, for example, but it misses something like an anti-root system where, for example, if you're doing avatar, that you are immune to roots, you're not stoppable except for CC, let's say for stuns, fears, whatever, but you will not be slowed and you will not be rooted. And that's actually something that I'm missing from Necrolords in Shadowlands with the Conqueror's Banner, where you could actually just run at people whenever you're actually popping it. But for now, it is a B tier spec. It does good damage. I'm enjoying it, but some comps, like let's say you're playing versus a Shadow Priest and a Elemental Shaman, you will not play in the game because you're going to get blasted from A to Z. So that's my placement for Arms Warrior. I do want put it to put it higher, but I think, in my opinion, in 3v3 and 2v2, your place is a bit more secure than in Soul Shuffle. Protection Warrior is tank, and the last spec is the Fury Warrior. And as you expected, it is not S tier, it is not A tier, it is very close to B tier, to be honest. It is a minus spec. It has good damage, but gets kited, but you have self-heal, which is dampened by the game mode. Soul Shuffle is pretty much the game mode where people are going to focus warriors because they are very squishy, they are dying left, right, and center. And for me, Fury Warriors, they are a bit better than Arms because they have a anti-root system with Blood Rage, PvP talent. It's something so fantastic that I would like to have it on my Arms Warrior, but for now, unfortunately, you don't have that. And you already see in this tier list, I put nothing into D tier because it's very hard to actually put something in D tier. I think every class is playable. I think it is not as garbage as people would say. Of course, you could put all the classes like in the bottom, for example, but I'm gonna be honest, versus casters, Destruction Warlock does feel right. I think Evoker is not as bad as people would think, although it's very hard to actually balance it around, like I said in the beginning of the video. And Fire Mages with the actual buffs to Pyroblast, Pyro, ball, whatever, everything you're doing is all actually going to be improved. And I think Fire Mages are going to be a sleeper spec coming into the next weeks of Soul Shuffle. So for me, nothing is in garbage. I think most classes between S and B tier are debatable for everyone. I think people could even say, look, Holy Paladin is my black cat of the season, and I would prefer to put it in S tier. You can do that, and you also can communicate with me what you're thinking about the tier list. Now, let's compare those two tier lists. I have my Soul Shuffle tier list here. You see my face. I've even put Protection Paladin and such on the tier list, but I'm going to see right now if I'm wrong since the prediction I've made. So this is a video made 3 weeks ago, before the season starts. So in the S tiers, I've put only Preservation, Demon Hunters, and Demonology. Well, now I will see Mischievous Monks as S tier, Assassination Rogues as S tier, and Feral Druids as S tier. You already see also Affliction Warlocks are A+, Shadow Priest also A+. Feral Druids are for me S tier right now, so that's a mistake of me. Unholy DKs are A+, for me it is also A+. Resto Druid, they are seen as A+, and for me it is also A+. Mistweaver Monks, they were A+ for me, and now for me it's S tier. Paladins, Retribution Paladin, I've put it in A+, but for me it drops a node because Divine Shield is not enough. Basically, that was my reasoning. They had a lot of burst, but Divine Shield was about to save them all the time, but that's not true. I think there is too many dispellers in the game, but also too many spells that can keep your allies, your enemies alive. And I think just because of that, it is a 8 tier spec. Who else? I've put Frost Decay in A tier, the same. I've put Disc Priest as A tier, which is wrong. I'm sorry, guys. It is a C tier spec. It's a bad prediction from me. Arcane Mages, I've put it in A+ right now, while it was in A tier before. I've put Fury Warriors at A tier, which is still A tier. I've put Assassination Rogues as A tier, but for me now it is a S tier spec. Enhancement Shaman is a A tier, but it is now a B tier spec for me. I've put it in A tier, but for me it is a B tier spec. If Devastation Evoker, they had the one shot, now they don't have it anymore, and that's why for me it is now a C tier spec. So you already see the changes that they actually made changes into my tier list. Gun Druid, I didn't want to actually put it in other tier than tanks. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, Johannes Dirks. Thank you. With Warcraft, put it in B tier. For now, it is A+ for me. Restoration Shaman, I've put it in B tier. I was wrong. It is a C tier spec. Holy Priest, I've put it in B tier, surprisingly, but for me, it's now an A tier spec. Holy Paladin, the same. For me, it's also an A tier spec now. Elemental Shaman is also up. Balance Druid is still in the same tier. Frost Mage is still in the same tier. Destruction Warlock, I'm so sorry, man. They are not good, so they are now underpowered. I find it good, but in solo shuffle it just is not cutting, right? It's not there. It's not really good for now. Survival Hunter is for me now A tier. Arms Warrior is for me B tier still. Outlaw Rogue is also B tier still. Subtlety Rogue is now easily A+. I've mistaken myself. I got baited. It is not a B tier spec. It is a A+. Protection Warrior, I've put it in the tank tier because I didn't really want to give it a rating. C tier for BM Hunter, which is still C tier for me. Fire Mage is also C tier for me, and I've put Protection Paladin as C tier, but I'm not willing to actually put it in tanks. Elsewhere than tanks on my current tier list. So this is my final tier list for Season 1, at least for the time being, until the mid-season is going to start, 10.0.5. If there are changes going up, I'm going to post a post on the communication tab whenever I feel like a spec is going to be lower or higher in solo shuffle. I will make different tier lists for different brackets, for 3v3, for 2v2 and RPGs. I've made predictions, and now I need to judge my predictions based on the season start. So thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet, and we will catch each other very soon in a next video. Have a great day. Bye.
I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up!